Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Remarkable Show. I'm your host, Scott Garber, and today we're excited to welcome our next guest, Brette Sadler. Brette, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, this has been a long time coming, Brette. I feel like we've been playing in the same worlds forever, and now we finally get a chance to be on the screen. So super excited to have you on. And for everyone tuning in for the first time, The Remarkable Show, the essence of what we're doing here is highlighting remarkable people, telling remarkable stories, and most importantly, making remarkable impacts. So Brette, we're going to go ahead, get to know you a little bit, and then excited to unpack the journey you've had in the sports and hospitality space. But before we get going, talk to us about this dog in the background. Who is this beauty?
Sure. So this is Six. He is my 6-year-old Vizsla, Hungarian Vizsla. We have another one. His name is Seven. And they keep me company every day. We're continuing on with a numbers game, if you will, for our dogs. We had the first dog. His name was Cinco. He was the 5th member of our family, and we continued that on. And in an ode to, or a little nod to 80s rock, he's 6 after Nikki Six. So
love it.
SIXX.
And Brette and I bonded right away. So everyone that's seeing this is my guy Otis. And so hers is 80 Rock, and my guys are named after Motown artists. So if you're not excited for this conversation, you might want to peace out now.
Yes.
So Brette, let's go back. We want to get to know you a little bit.
Sure.
We know you're from Florida, but let's start with your journey, at the University of Miami. Talk to us about what that was like, why sports marketing, and we'll build from there.
Sure, happy to. So I went to the University of Miami. I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and I really wanted to be out of school where football was the talk of the town, and the journey to the game on every Saturday was an experience. And so that's where I landed, and I landed there at a perfect time because that was our championship years, and we'll never forget it. I was always an athlete growing up, and University of Miami sports, clearly elite athletes. So I didn't really qualify to play or participate in any of those sports on a scholarship. So when I got there, freshman week, everybody's setting up in the breezeway with their, sororities and fraternities and clubs. And there was the rowing team, and there was an 8-foot table with flyers that said, "We're looking for rowers." So with Title IX, it was a varsity sport, and I'm like, sure, I'll do that. I've never rowed in a boat ever, but wanted to, continue that success of being on a team sport and, have that structure. So I quickly got on the team, and it was great, and lifelong friends that are still my boatmates. And from there, being exposed to the Hecht athletic department and being exposed as a student athlete, obviously it pulled that connection to sports even closer. And through my time there, eventually was an intern in the sports marketing department. So worked mostly on, revenue generating sports, of course. So football, basketball, and baseball. My first job was taking down outfield banners at Mark Light Stadium because it's adjacent to Fraternity Row, and the banners always would get stolen in the middle of the night, as you can imagine. The Hooters banners and, Budweiser banners and things like that, they were always mysteriously missing. So my job was to wait till after the game and went out there with bungee cords and literally folded up outfield banners. So I talked about that another time, like the up and coming future and rising stars right now. What they're doing at 20 was not what I was doing at 20. I mean, they're building apps and really moving the business forward. And I'm out there folding up banners. So just very interesting how, time has accelerated the industry as a whole.
Yep.
So worked in the sports marketing department, and then at the time the Florida Marlins were incepted. And so a lot of my counterparts and supervisors and bosses, everybody kind of left and went to the Marlins at that time. And then Wayne Huizinga then bought the Florida Panthers. And so I ended up with the Florida Panthers within those contacts and networking. And I think that's really one of my keys to success is those networks and those connections are the ones that will continue to take you to the next level, whether it's directly or indirectly. So I really do, a huge nod to the University of Miami sports marketing program and all the contacts I had there, very early on in my career. And I finished in 3 years. And I only say that because I want to push anyone out of college too early, because it was a great time, but I felt like there was so much more for me to do. So I wanted to graduate quickly because I was so anxious to get out there and start making a difference. And I went to intersessions, I went to summer school, and growing up in Tampa, I didn't have to take the whole summer to like visit with my family. It was a quick trip home. I could go whenever I wanted, a 40-minute flight. So when I found out these other opportunities to continue to complete my degree, I just did it quicker.
I love that. I love that. There's a couple of things I want to unpack there, but shout out to one of the I don't know, I'm a disciple of him. He's my uncle, but he's a mutual connection. So shout out to Steve Nudelberg, and one of his principles, networking is one letter away from not working. And I think, your journey as we continue to go on it with you, it all comes from those deep rooted networks that you were able to cultivate. And the U in the 90s is maybe one of the most iconic sports times and franchises that we know about or talk about. So I'm curious, what nuggets did you take from, sort of the transformation of Coral Gables as you watched it happen? And how did that help as you went through to the Panthers and, on to other ventures in the sports space?
Yeah, Coral Gables is this perfect little, neighborhood in the middle of South Florida, and it's perfectly nestled, I think, between Coconut Grove and Kendall, and just a great community down there. And I think the success point there also is that the University of Miami was pro sports. It was also the Heat, it was also the Dolphins, and then at that time there wasn't Panthers and Marlins, so it really was football, Dolphins, and Heat, and that was it. Yes, there's always the beach to contest to, and there's always, fun things, and Coconut Grove and South Beach and everything else to compete against. But I think, we were a pro sport, period. And so all the partners that sponsored the Dolphins and the Heat at the time were also our University of Miami sponsors. So we already kind of felt that momentum of being a pro sports team. And then the Marlins came, and then the Dolphins came. So, and then, Wayne Huizenga owned 3 of the 4 teams.
Yep.
So also a huge, huge family of people. When you say you work for Wayne Huizenga, like, you don't say no more, you just know. There was a feeling, there was a family mentality that came with that. We did our first tri-team deal ever, which was AT&T. So it was a Panthers, Marlins, and Dolphins deal. So really iconic, monumental things that were happening with those 3 teams. And I have the Heat.
And I have to ask you, right? Because I think sometimes these moments happen and we don't even know really the breadth of how big this opportunity is. When you were going through it, young, right? Coming out of college, with the Panthers in the early 90s, did you realize the magnitude of the Huizengas and the opportunity you had at your fingertips there?
I didn't. And I continue to preach that, because I think people take that for granted. And whether the Huizengas or you don't, it's just such an impactful family and what they did for all of us. But as a young person, and you're looking up to, your directors and your VPs and presidents of these teams, you're soaking it all in, but you're moving so quickly. I don't think I realized that until, further down the line, right? I mean, at the Panthers, I did everything except to win the Stanley Cup. I didn't walk away with the ring.
Yep.
Period. And so we had the Year of the Rat, we had the Year of the Rat. The Rat was amazing. Year of the Rat was amazing. Seeing Marty and Wayne embracing the Year of the Rat, down, in the bowels of the arena as we collected the rats, it was just an amazing, magical time. And then having, 2 lockouts, 2 labor disputes. We hosted the All-Star game. We hosted the draft. We built a new building. We named it 3 times. I was that 22-year-old schlepping back and forth from our headquarters in Fort Lauderdale to Miami Arena. And when we got there, I was the person who's putting up the dashboards with the event ops team, who are now running buildings everywhere around this country. So just a really interesting time. And that's kind of where my mind goes, is that, we were all, rolling up our sleeves and doing it. And then when you step away and you look at it and you're like, gosh, I was so close to winning a cup ring. That's the last thing on my list to do. Yeah. So it really is kind of a special time. So I hope that people up and coming, kind of realize what they have.
Well, and I think we'll use that as a catalyst, because in today's world, Brett, I mean, we all sort of live in this social gratification, instant gratification, and not to say that the impact that younger folks are making, I arguably think you have more reach right now, but to get where you're at, and we're going to talk about your stint at Octagon and UFC, ultimate leading up to where you're at now, but you don't get there without sort of putting in the dirty work and the hard work. And so I'm curious, as you now have climbed the ladder and you're sending it back down, do you find this generation willing to roll up their sleeves and do the dirty work? Or what is the state of the union right now with, the market, the sports marketing scene?
Mm-hmm. I wish I had a question that I could use during an interview process that would separate those people from not, right? How do you really find out how deep their passion is? So, because again, I can teach anyone the job. We're not, curing cancer here. We're not doing brain surgery. This is fairly easy, client-focused management, making sure you're communicating, making sure you're closing loops, making sure you're attentive and you're listening, and really just following some easy steps. So I really have to hire, and I really look for people who get it. And sometimes it's hard to understand if they get it or not get it. But the minute you meet somebody you kind of know and have worked with them, you're like, I get it. You don't get it.
Exactly.
So, and I said this to my team the other day, now that we're on teams a lot, I can see, you're red, yellow, or green. You can see when people are working and they're on their computers. Very telling.
Yes.
Who's working or not. And I remember it was a Monday a few weeks ago. It was 8:41 and both my directors were on. Our legal was on. My counterpart in marketing was on. Like, it's 8:40 on a Monday night.
It's a lifestyle.
We're just busy. Yeah. And nobody's bitching about it. It's just, here we are, like doing our thing. And it just made me smile, but I kind of felt like that. Like, I shouldn't really thank them for working at night, because that's really not fair either. But they were all working on their own. Like, I mean, I was in there working too. Like, there's just stuff to get done. Yeah. And I also realized that, at 2:00 in the afternoon, if you want to go do your errands or do whatever, then just do that. Because I know my team's going to get the job done. So
super cool.
Yeah, I hope that people that are up and coming get it. I try to use examples when I'm talking to students and mentees that, look, it's not a job. You don't come in 8 to 5. We're like retail, we're entertainment, we're sports. You're working on Thanksgiving, you're working on New Year's Eve, you're working on New Year's Day. Panthers always had a noon game on New Year's Day. There wasn't a New Year's Eve parties. It was like we worked until 10 and then, you showed up the next morning. So I don't know. I wish there was a question that you could ask for somebody to just show you that, yeah, they're in it for the real deal.
And I think, that 80-20 rule is so applicable across every facet of life. And so they're diamonds in the rough, right? And, it's interesting as forums, and mediums change in which we communicate. I think you can almost disguise that a little bit more, and then you're in over your head before you know it. And so super fascinating. And Brett, this has been so interesting just getting to know you and sort of like the buildup of your career. I want to jump ahead a little bit. And if you want to reel me back, feel free. But sure. I'm curious to talk about the UFC. I think there's a lot of interesting things from what I've read and done some research on that parallel to the experience that we may have just gone through with COVID, that I'm wondering what you pulled from. So for everyone listening, if you could just give us the background of how you landed at the UFC and sort of what that experience was like, and then we'll dive into it.
Yeah, I'm going to actually relate it back to the Huizinga family, because that's really where it started. So I got hired at the UFC by Mike Mossholder, who was at the Dolphins when I was at the Panthers, period.
Catch a theme here, guys?
He knew me and I knew him. We never worked together. I don't even think we ever talked. We knew each other. We knew, if there was LinkedIn at the time, that there wasn't, we would have 400 connections, like, period. Like, I knew Mike Mossholder. I called my friends. I'm like, do you know Mike Mossholder? What's his deal? Like, I never worked with him, but I knew him. And of course, he came out with raving reviews. And I was like, well, I have an interview with him. So he actually, when he left the Dolphins, he went to Churchill Downs. Then he went to Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Then he was hired by the UFC, which is how he got to Vegas.
Yep.
I, in a similar path, went to Octagon in Atlanta. Then he was looking for someone with team or property experience Fortune 500 company experience and agency experience. And I was the trifecta. I'd worked for a team. I'd worked at Octagon, so I had agency experience for Home Depot, which is a Fortune 500 company. So when he was looking for this, I was like, well, you hit the jackpot because I got all three of those. He was really changing the way that the UFC approached sponsorships. And before he got there, it was Mickey's, Condom Depot, like it was all those kind of challenger brands, a little, outskirts. Yep. And he was, and the team at UFC was finally changing over. They got Anheuser-Busch to this long-term partnership with Bud Light. And it kind of evolved. And that was the true turning point, in my opinion, of the UFC. UFC wasn't even on my radar. I'm not an MMA person. I've grown to like it. I've grown to really understand it better. And I think is definitely, when you're walking by a bar, if you're at Buffalo Wild Wings and you see it out of the corner of your eye and something happens, and if you don't understand it, I can see how that is the case. But knowing it now and knowing the strategy and the actual athleticism that goes into it, much bigger appreciation. But before I was like, I don't even know what MMA was because that wasn't in my repertoire of things. So yeah, I came from South Florida. I mean, it's a football place, right? It's everything football. So it's all you know. So again, the UFC movement comes back from Mike Mossholder, and I'm going to throw out a Jim Frivola. It was also there. So another person from the Dolphins that was a contact of mine. So that made me comfortable. I'm like, oh, well, if Jim's there and I'm there, this is like great. Like we're all this little posse of Florida people that have, then there's a lot of us out here, by the way, in Vegas because we like warm weather. But yes, it's interesting. And it all goes back to South Florida. Even last night I was at dinner with some LPGA people, and Mike Nichols worked with me at the Florida Panthers. He's been with the LPGA for 15 years. And here we are again. It all goes back to Florida. It all goes back to the Huizingas.
And I think that's something that everyone listening, that's the remarkable thread that I think everyone should take from this. I mean, Brette's doing amazing things, in the community, and we're going to touch on this as we re-enter back from this, post-COVID era, but networking, and not burning bridges, Brette. I think, one of the things that I want to go and touch on real quick is, whenever, companies are acquired or you're forced to leave or change happens, what advice would you give young professionals or really anybody to make sure those relationships stay intact so you can use them at, future ventures or other opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And that did happen. So in 2016, Endeavor bought the UFC, and obviously there's changes, there's consolidation, there's new ownership, there's new leadership, there's just a new intent for that company. And so you really got to roll with the punches. You really do. I mean, the Panthers had changeover, Octagon, had changeover with Home Depot. They had changeover at their leadership too. And you really just have to go and pick and choose through, all of your managers, like, what do you want to take from this person? And then there's things you're not going to want to take, and you're going to know that really quick. And you're going to put that in a place that you're like, okay, well, I know not to do that, but I'm going to do this. And so all of my great leaders that I've had, I've taken, those things. And even if they weren't my direct leader, but they were somebody within the circle, or my boss's counterpart, or one of my clients. I mean, I still to this day have clients from Southeast Toyota that I'm super friendly with. And they told me to only have 2 kids because dinettes are sold with 4 chairs. Done. Okay. That sounds right. Because again, I was pregnant at the Panthers. So like, as my daughters now are graduating, they're in college at Florida State and going to University of West Florida, and they're adults now. My people, right, remembered me pregnant, and they're like, this is amazing. I'm like, yeah, 2 kids. That's it. Yeah. Dinettes, 4 seats. That's it.
I love that.
That was a shout out to, I think Forrest Heathcott told me that.
Yo, and also quick shout out to the Argos for one of your daughters going to West Florida. Yes. Let's go.
I know. I'm exciid.
I'd give you a shout out for the Knowles, but hopefully Mark doesn't hear this, but I can't give it to him. I don't know.
Well, Florida, I'm not a Florida Gator fan. I know that the Noodlebergs are. So yeah, I'm just going to stay Florida State, Miami, and Argos.
Hey, listen, I'll go Argos with you. I went to school in Mobile, Alabama, so we got down there, and my sister actually graduated from West Florida. So it's a family affair at this point, Brette.
I love it. I love it. There's a lot of people there too.
Exactly. Right. So let's, we're going to bring this up to current speed now. Right. So we've sort of told some remarkable stories where you obviously a remarkable person. Let's talk about the impact. Right. And so we've just gone through a tumultuous time as a species, as a race. And let's drill down into hospitality. What is the last 12 months? How did you guys stay afloat? What were some of the things you leaned on from your past? Give us a little bit of a breath there.
Sure. So, a horrible time. I mean, I started in October of 19. So I was only there for five full months before that happened. And then, we had to make tough decisions. There were layoffs, there were furloughs. And then during that time, jobs were eliminated. In our division, there were 7 VPs that were eliminated. And I thought for sure, I'm like, uh-oh, I'm last one in, first one out. Like I was not very comfortable at the moment. And I was like, well, whatever I can do, I can do it. Another tip for everyone, when you're revenue generating, you might be a little bit luckier than the others. And that's not, anything bad to anyone else, but it is something to, it's not always going to save you either, but it is something to always make sure that you're looking at, driving revenue for your company. So unfortunately, my team was furloughed. And then later in August, Nevada law requires you to actually separate your employees from your company if there's no line of sight to them when they're coming back, to allow them to go find other jobs. So we actually had to separate our staff from us legally, because you can't hold them back and keep dragging them along saying, oh, we're going to bring you back, because if they need to go out and find another job, they need to do that. So
Brett, can I interrupt you real quick?
Yeah.
I have a question, and I think we don't talk about this to leaders as much. How did you handle that from a psychological and emotional standpoint, knowing you had to make this call, but it's just one of the hardest things I think that you could do as a leader? How did you handle that?
Yeah. So obviously, when my phone rings at 7 p.m. at any time and it's your boss, you don't want to answer it, but it's something. And he called probably every 3 days with something, another level, here's more cuts. We have to get it down by another 25%, whatever that was. And it was very challenging. And it was a Sunday night. We had to call people on Sunday night and tell them not to come into work that next day. It was really, really difficult. And my leader, Lance, had to really, he was great with everything and being as transparent as possible. And then I worked with my director of sales and my director of activation, and we dual called every person, because I didn't want it to fall on any one person. I also felt like my directors should have that experience, and we should just tag team this. And it's not good news. And they knew they were going to get this call, or they suspected they would. And as you can imagine, a lot of texting going on, and did you get the call yet? And did you get the call yet? And it was difficult. But I remember sitting on my floor upstairs in my bedroom when everyone was having dinner, and it was 6 o'clock on a Sunday night or whatever it was. And it was like, have these calls done by this time. And we kind of had a script that we went off of, and, tried to make it as personal as, I shouldn't say not as personal, but try to do whatever we could to make it like, it's not our fault. Like there's nothing we can really do. And the team really did, responded as well as expected. I mean, they knew it wasn't personal.
Correct.
Clearly. But then as the weeks went on, you had to cut more, and you had to cut more, and you had to cut more. And then it was pretty unfortunate.
I always just get fascinated because, mental health, mindfulness has really come up, with the pandemic. Yeah. Right. And it's one of those things to me where I think we always think about the people we're firing, but we sometimes neglect the leaders who have to make those really hard decisions. And we wouldn't have been making this if it wasn't for this unforeseen circumstance. And so didn't want to skim over that, would love for you to continue the story, but I just wanted to pay homage to this idea that, leaders have to make these really hard decisions that also make an impact to their psyche and well-being as well. So it's not always remarkable things, but that's the reality of the shit that was going on. And so we got to talk about it too,
Yeah, no, it's the hard things. And like I said, when we eventually had to separate from separate those employees, like legally, like they all got a letter that said you're officially separated, which was another call point that we all had, and said, you're going to get a letter. There's a lot of legalese in it. There's a lot of, Nevada law statutes and things that they talked about in this letter that, weren't our doing. It was just, we had to do it. But then in Vegas, there's unions and there's different types of workers, and there's hourly workers, and there's staff, and there's corporate, and there's property. And like, there's all these different tiers of levels of people that, really all had to be handled differently. But we all kept in touch. We all texted, we all sent jobs if we saw them become available, and we all did what we could. And, we met for coffee, or, I just tried to keep everybody's hopes up as much as I could, but we didn't really have line of sight either. To bringing people back and when that was going to be. And then to get people back is also a process internally that everyone was under review, and you had to like literally go to bat for everyone.
How interesting. And we're going to bring it back to the Huizengas in South Florida, because what's so interesting is to hear that pivot, right? I think a lot of people if you don't practice this lifestyle of networking, connecting, sharing leads, looking out for your tribe, how do you do that in real time when the shit hit the fan? And so it's really neat to see those deep roots come back out when change happened at scale. We go back to what we're used to, and that's just leaning into networking, connecting, and elevating, right? And so really neat, and I appreciate the transparency. I think this is a lot of folks, they don't get a chance to hear what it's like behind the curtain. And so don't want to spend too much time on the negative, but let's go ahead. What's on the horizon, right? We're starting to open back up. Vaccines are coming out. What can we expect from Vegas over the next 6 months?
Yeah, well, we are doing, I think it's June 1st. So in a week or so, we're going to be 100% open. We're basically 100% open now. We've had, plexiglass is down, masks aren't needed. Live events, large scale live events will be back July 1. So that's like the grand reopening, if you will. In fact, I went online the other day to try to book, hotel rooms for friends, and there's none available. So, I think we might be at my house, but, but that's like, there's going to be a big kind of reopening of Vegas. But I was at dinner last night at Prime, and the patio was packed, nothing even happened. So it's only good things from here on up. Obviously our search shows are coming back. We had some limited shows with, social distancing, that were out there and available. Nightclubs, I think I need to confirm, but I think nightclubs will come back as well. I don't know if it's on the July 1st date or after, but I'm going to assume it's July 1st date. But we're doing some great things. And just on my teams, going back a little bit about like what happened during the pandemic time, is that we actually refocused and re-identified parameters and goals of how we go to market. So based on the bandwidth that we have and the limited staff, because I was not able to bring back everybody, we had to actually really hone in on large scale deals. So before, deals would come left, right, and center, and people are buying, whether it's media or out of home or pop-up promotions or whatever that is. And we really have to now, kind of put them on the back burner and just be like, hey, we'll get to you when we can, but I have one sales manager and one sales director and myself, and our boss. So like, if it's not a kind of a large scale multi-year deal, we're not really engaging with that because we just don't have the bandwidth. It also helps internally because as people are coming to us asking for sponsorship and opportunities, they know that the bandwidth is short. So, they can't really help us. We're like, we can't really do this Friday night event or whatever it is.
It's lean, right? I think we got fat there for a little bit, and there was a lot of cushioning. And now, COVID, there was a lot of terrible things, but I think it did show, one, that we could work remotely and still get productivity, and two, hey, we can trim the fat and reallocate dollars to be more effective, more automated, more forward facing. And I think we wouldn't have gotten there at this velocity without COVID, right? So it's not all negative coming out of this channel. As we wind down, I'm really excited to ask you this question. Oh, is that your Vizsla?
It is.
I love it. The picture background is barking.
Yeah, exactly. Sound effects.
So I mean, I'm curious because, obviously here at Remarkable, we do a lot on the automated retail side. Talk to me about some of the facelifts from, on the strip. Are you seeing things become more automated or embracing the digital world more? What is that like from your perspective?
Yeah, there's definitely, mobile check-in was quickly pushed to the front of the line from our digital ventures team. It's a little interesting. I don't know if the adoption rate is as high as I think maybe we wanted it. As you can imagine, some of our luxury properties probably have a little higher demographic that maybe they're not on their phones as much as a younger demographic, and maybe they like to physically go up to the counter and talk to somebody and make their dinner reservations, with a real person, and that is a hospitality thing, right? I mean, you want a face-to-face host or concierge or a restaurant operator, so I can understand that. I think that obviously mobile check-in and a lot of the digital opportunities, QR codes are everywhere. I think that's a no-brainer. I don't know why we ever need a printed menu again. I mean, I kind of love that because I can scroll my own thing and I can look up things and, kind of look at the ingredients or whatever that at my own will, and I'm not squinting, or if it's too dark in the restaurant, or, I guess I kind of showed my age there, but yeah. Might need the extra light.
Brette, you don't have good eyes restaurant. You don't have good eyes at 23 years old. What's going on?
You're right.
Oh man, no, that's.
So I think QR codes for sure. And push. We're trying to work on push notifications. So like if you're waiting in line for a reservation, like, hey, well there might be a line over here, but across the patio, this restaurant has no wait. So is it helping navigate our customers to other properties and other outlets, especially as they're not all open until July 1. So we're still navigating people. Maybe they're not open for lunch, they're only open for dinner. So we're still educating everybody as they come through.
Super cool. And I mean, look at this is here to stay. The virtual digital world is, we are more connected than ever, even though sometimes it feels like we're more disconnected than ever. We'll save that for another conversation. But Brette, this has been an absolute just a blast to spend 40 minutes with you, getting to know you a little bit and some of the amazing things you're doing. Before we wind down, I have one last question for you, and we're going to come completely off script here. But Brette, if you could tell the listeners one thing you've done in your life that you would recommend they do or experience in theirs, what would that be and why?
I mean, this is kind of when someone's like, what's your quote? I'm like, be true to your brand. So that's my thing. That's my mantra. So if something doesn't feel right in your gut, it's not right. Acknowledge it, accept it, and then make a plan to move away from it or to make a change. So if it doesn't feel right, it's not. And so that's happened on many occasions, some bigger things than smaller. Some have been in a meeting and some have been a career change. So just really know yourself. You're the only thing you have. And I've said this before, my business card may have the MGM logo on it right now, but it didn't before. And it might not going forward. So, I'm not Brette Sadler with UFC. I'm not Brette Sadler with Octagon. I'm not Brette Sadler with MGM. I'm Brette Sadler, and my clients will continue to build, to do business with me because of me. And they also know there's things in my control, there's things not in my control. So I think people can appreciate that, and being just genuine and authentic. You get what you get.
I was going to for the last 45 minutes, you have been unapologetically Brette Sadler. And I think that is, that's what the world needs. And so it's the essence of why we started this show, because we didn't want to highlight just what you do in one sector of life. This is a holistic journey and it's a marathon. And so things change mile to mile. And, Brette, this is just the first of many, for anyone that's out there that's listening, that wants to connect with you, follow your journey, get behind your brand, where can they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter as much. I'm on there to watch and to go there for a resource, but it just moves so quickly for me. I just would be glued to it all the time. So, but LinkedIn, and I speak to a lot of people. Anytime someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn, I usually will at least give them a half hour, 45 minutes. I just feel like that's the way I give back. And I want people to be as passionate about their jobs as I am, whether it's in my industry or not. But I think really you have to find something you love to do, because you're going to do it all the time. you know, there's many times my husband's like, you know, you get paid to do your job. I'm like, no, this is fun. Like, I'm going to work all day and all night. He's like, you know, you're getting paid, right? I'm like, oh, that's just gravy. Like, to me, like, you know, yes, I need to get paid, but that's not what drives me.
I want to take that statement, capture it, put it in a bottle, and send it to everybody, because that is the essence of the Remarkable Show. Brette Sadler, thank you so much for coming on. We're going to get you and follow you throughout your journey, so we'd love to have you back. But again, everybody, I'm Scott Garber. This is the Remarkable Show, and we're highlighting remarkable people, telling remarkable stories, and most importantly, making remarkable impact. Brette, thank you so much, and keep on pillaging ahead.
Great. Thank you so much. Pleasure being here.